Yo, what is going on, my people? I am back. Hope y'all are having a wonderful day. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about my history with drugs. Now, before I get into this, I do want to say, do not follow in my footsteps. Alright, a lot of these drugs that I'm going to be mentioning, they can really screw you over. If you take too much, or you're getting something from someone who's cut the product and put fillers in that's a lot worse than the drug itself, can really be bad news bears for everyone involved. And lastly, this video is not going to be too long because what I'm going to do is, for most of these drugs, I have stories that I could actually tell about them. So this is really going to be kind of like a roadmap explaining like time frames where all these took place, because I feel like it would be a lot easier to understand the whole timeline of all these different drug story times that I'm going to be doing if you already know like points where these took place. So without further ado, let's just hop in, starting in the 3rd grade. Now, I've likely explained this before, even if it was just a video that I ended up just deleting, never doing anything with. But basically, growing up, in my very early years of school, I had a lot of problems with focusing and keeping my hands to myself and not standing up just every 10 seconds to do something random. And my parents used to just shuffle it off as I was just being purposely stupid and acting out. But then, finally, my teachers were fed up with it enough that they finally told my parents either get me checked out or I'm going to be expelled from school because of my behavior. So they took me to a doctor and they ran their exams and whatnot that they had to do. And it turns out I had ADHD and I was also dealing with bipolar disorder. Now, the symptoms of ADHD totally made sense and matched up, but really, like, to begin with, the whole bipolar disorder didn't really make a whole lot of sense. But then looking back, of course I was getting bullied all throughout my elementary and early middle school years, and I was just always kind of keeping to myself because of it, so I can kind of understand. But really, my bipolar disorder became a lot more apparent as I had gotten older. So having told my parents the news of what I was dealing with, he suggested I get put on Adderall for my ADHD. Now, I couldn't tell you what the dosage would have been because just don't know. I couldn't tell you, but I would assume it was probably like the lowest dose pills of Adderall that they offer because of my age. Now, Adderall didn't really solve the problem, but it sure as fuck helped. Because that, like, mental click that would give me the impulse to just have random outbursts in class was greatly reduced. And like I say, it didn't completely solve it, but it definitely reduced it down to maybe happening once or twice a week, which my teachers could put up with so much better than, when it was every 10 minutes at best. So they had me on Adderall for about, I think, like 3 or 4 months to make sure that I wouldn't have any side effects from it, and everything was really going okay. So they went ahead and put me on Zoloft as well to help with my bipolar disorder. Now, of course, at the time where my symptoms of being bipolar weren't really that apparent, there really was no good way of telling if Zoloft was actually doing anything or not. Now, I can tell you, after having been switched from it to another similar medicine and being switched back to Zoloft for a very short time after that, it didn't do shit. Not like the other comparable medicine that I'm going to be explaining here in a little bit. So now we can fast forward to my 6th grade year. Now, I've already made a video about this, so I'm not really going to mention weed on here, but 6th grade year was when I first got into weed. But then a little bit later in the year, I ended up having a knee injury and I had gotten put on Lortab. Now, I'm not really going to delve into that too much because I'm going to make a story time eventually about all my different injuries that I've had and such. And I'll also probably tell a story about when I was on lore tab for that duration. But then, rounding off my 6th grade year, the only other thing that really happened was me overdosing on Zoloft. And again, that's going to be a video of its own because it's not a long story, but it's not a short story either. So now we can move on to the following year, and the only thing that actually ended up just happening was the doctor had switched me from Zoloft to Xanax. Probably 6 months or so, things were fine, but then I started having reactions to being on Xanax. I was like breaking out in hives. My body was just covered in red, itchy spots, and it wasn't like chicken pox or anything like that. It was just my body having a bad reaction to the Xanax. And so I had gotten switched back to Zoloft. I think it was only ended up being like a 30-day prescription, and then they put me back on Xanax, and I never ended up having any issues with it again. So don't know, it may not even have been the Xannies that actually caused it, but pretty damn coincidental if I say so myself. I was going to move on to my next year, but I completely forgot something that I mentioned to put on the list, and that was towards the end of my... No, actually it was after I graduated 7th grade. It was during that summer. I had broke my hip, and I had gotten put back on lore tab once again. But again, I'm not going to talk about either of those because they're going to get their own respective videos. So now, fuck you, Watch. So now moving on, starting my 8th grade, this is where I went from having medications prescribed to me to getting them to basically get fucked up pretty much. Because my 8th grade year was when I had moved to Kentucky, so I had changed states and had started a new school, and I didn't have a way of getting weed. But basically, my 8th grade year, the only two notable drugs that I can recall having done was I started sipping lean for a while, and I had gotten Vicodin. Now, mind you, I was still on Adderall and Xanax throughout all the times of these different drugs I've done between my 8th grade and junior year. So that's going to be something to keep in mind when I tell these individual stories. So then we go to my freshman year of high school. So now going into my freshman year of high school, this is when I started getting into tripping on acid. And, you know, this was kind of something that was off and on throughout my high school years because it was really just kind of a whenever I could find someone who was selling it type of deal. This was also the same year that my dealer, who pretty much was my supplier of drugs all throughout high school, he had gotten his hands on some K2. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's spice. And spice is basically a synthetic weed. Now, this is going to be an interesting story time that I'll be telling about this one because, let's just say without giving too much detail and spoiling it, it was cut with a drug that is very, 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 very lethal. So with those being the only drugs that I recall having done my freshman year, let's move on to my sophomore year. And once again, there was only two new drugs that I ended up doing. The first one being cocaine, and this was kind of a one-time only thing up until after I had graduated and I was working up in Indiana. Now, this next drug I'm going to mention is still something kind of controversial in the quote-unquote drug world, but this is a drug that, you know, if I wasn't in a situation where I wasn't able to smoke weed, which is the situation I'm in now, if I was able to smoke it but I didn't have any, if I was able to get my hands on some fucking ketamine, I would fucking have a blast. But again, I know I'm kind of blueballing y'all with some of these that I'm mentioning, but that's going to be probably a few different story times, honestly, just on ketamine. Now, moving forward to my junior year, there's only one drug I can recall doing. I keep thinking there was another one, but I've been thinking about this for, I don't know, for like a week now, and I'm pretty sure this was the only one, but I had gotten into Molly for a short stint. So now we move on to my senior year. One drug I kind of got back into once or twice, and then there was a new drug that I had picked up that pretty much did most of my senior year, and that was Percocets. Now, Perkies, when used as prescribed, they're okay, but when you use them like I did, which of course is going to be its own video, it can really fuck you up and it can kill you. After all, that is how Juice WRLD passed away. No joke, that's not something to fuck with. But then the other drug that I had gotten back into was lean, but there was one time in particular that I had mixed it with another medication. Also, it's windy as fuck out right now. And that's going to be its own story. So now I've graduated high school, and, you know, this wasn't even a month after graduating. And I had done this once and one time only, and that was heroin. I'll just let that sink in a moment. It, of course, was, you know, of all these drugs I mentioned, the one that I wish I never did, but at the same time, it was the one that told me I need to just cut any hard drugs out of my life. And again, I'm going to go into that when I make the video on it. So there. That was my history with different drugs. You know, of course, there's drugs I've not done, like meth and crystal and shit like that. I don't want to, you know. I've had my stint with hard drugs, and I really don't want to, go back into that. And of course, fortunately, I'm the type of person that I don't get addicted to things unless I want to. And even if I do, if I tell myself I want to quit, I can. And I know some people are going to ask, if I could start life over and, not do any of those drugs, would I? And to be honest, I don't really know what answer I would give that. Because on one hand, when I look at that list of all the drugs I've done, of course, I'm not really going to include the ones I was prescribed, because that's a different reason, but if I hadn't have done them, it wouldn't have really made me who I am, and I don't really know who I would be had I have never done, these various drugs. But that is going to wrap this video up. I hope you all did enjoy this video. Hope you all are looking forward to what story times are going to be coming out in the future. The last video I made was a new series that I'm starting, talking about, getting into YouTube and what it's like starting, so on and so forth. I'm probably going to make another episode of that for next week's video. And then the week after that will be another story time. I'm probably just going to try to alternate them until I've kind of finished with the whole YouTube creative series thing. But yeah, if you did enjoy this video, feel free to leave a like. And if you're new here and you like my content, you're always welcome to subscribe and can check out some of my other videos. I don't really have a lot of videos up at this moment in time of recording this, but if you're watching this a month or so down the road, there will obviously be more videos, because I'm currently trying to upload at least once a week. And fortunately, I've been keeping to that, but there's no guarantee I'm going to continue to keep to that, because I'm a just autistic fuck that can't keep a schedule very well. But until next time, I will catch you all in the next video. I'm out.